Her cookie documentary is a massive flop.
This is Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Every mainstream media outlet have been talking about cookie queens. This is publicity that the Putin documentary could only imagine.
So it's CatVideoFest 2026, but I want to watch it.
Her first film beaten by a compilation of the world's best cat videos at the box office.
I think it's boring. I think it meanders.
And still no one showed up. And I'll tell you why. These two are a drag on any project.
Instead of spotlighting the girls or the organization or the film, Meghan Markle made it all about herself. Who's surprised?
Harry and Meghan had to pay to get their names added to this thing as executive producers. I would love to know how much they paid to get their names added to this thing. Oh, it's just too funny.
They don't boost a project, they drag a project.
You're still a pretty big failure when it really matters.
Cookie Queens opened in 446 theaters. CatVideoFest opened in 255. The compilation of cat videos, playing on 191 fewer screens, finished the weekend $214,152 ahead.
But her latest project, Cookie Queens, which has also gotten some backlash, we've reported on it before, flopped at the box office and falling embarrassingly short on its opening weekend.
This was meant to be kind of a bit of a saving grace for Archwell, if you will, because their most recent efforts, the With Love Meghan, Harry's polo thing, just really didn't do so great. Ended up a bit of an embarrassment for them in terms of like business and production companies and whatnot. It didn't go well.
CatVideoFest averaged $2,229 a theater. Cookie Queens averaged $794. That is roughly 2.81 times as much money out of every single room. By rank, CatVideoFest landed at number 10. Cookie Queens landed at number 13. And number 10 against number 13 is not the worst of it. There is a film in that same cluster that finished above Cookie Queens while playing on 6 screens. Not 600. 6.
But to make things worse, it was beaten by cinema screenings of the world's #1 cat video festival, which was also shown in US theaters. Now that movie sounds awesome.
It was pretty boring. And honestly, I came out of the theater liking the Girl Scouts a heck of a lot less than I did with my pretty neutral remembrance of them before.
Then there is the part that makes the whole chart harder to explain away. This was not a film dumped into August with no support behind it. It came out of a festival run, a competitive acquisition, and an audience any marketing department would call obvious. All of that walked into 446 theaters and came out with $794 a room. The full chart is where it stops being funny and starts being a measurement. Box Office Mojo's final domestic chart for the weekend of the 7th through the 9th of August closed with Cookie Queens sitting at number 13, and nothing about that position improved after the fact.
This is a couple who had international publicity around this movie, and they could not make more than $800 per theater. The humiliation has got even worse, though, because the line that the mainstream media is picking up on, and I don't blame them, by the way, is the fact that Cookie Queens has been beaten at the box office by a cat video compilation.
446 theaters is a real release. It is a physical footprint across most of the country, a booking operation, and a weekend where a person in most mid-sized cities could get in a car on a Friday night and reach a screening without planning a trip around it. Availability was the one thing it had in abundance. What it did not have was anyone using it. Across that entire footprint, the film took $794 a location for the whole weekend, 3 days, every showtime included. Carry that number, because every other figure in this story is the same number wearing a different outfit. The gross is the $700 room multiplied by 446. The gap with the cats is the same room measured against a fuller one. Hold the room and the rest follows.
This is a problem, right? Every time they do something and make something, it bombs. It does worse.
Royal News Network posted, "Will the embarrassment never cease?" At least for Meghan Markle, it seems unlikely. I don't know why she put herself out there so much on the promotional tour, as it looks even more like a failure on her. She owns it now. And the thing is, it's all well and good for that industry expert to say, well, these documentaries fly on streaming services rather than in cinemas. My question would be then, Meghan, you've got a first look deal with Netflix. Why couldn't you get them to broadcast Cookie Queens? Because it's rubbish and they are done with you.
CatVideoFest played 191 rooms fewer and pulled roughly 2.81 times as much out of each one it had. Not slightly better, nearly 3 times, from a smaller position on the same chart, against a release that had every advantage of reach. A multiplier like that measures one thing, which is how many people chose to buy a ticket once the option was actually in front of them. Both films were in front of people that weekend. One of them converted. This is where reach stops being a compliment. A thin average on a small release is invisible. It looks like a platform opening, finding its feet, and nobody outside the trades ever hears about it. 446 theaters removes that cover completely. The size of the footprint is what turns a quiet result into a visible one, because the wider you are, the more rooms there are to be counted in. The direct comparison reduces to one distinction, and it is worth saying plainly. Cookie Queens was easier to find. CatVideoFest was easier to sell. The first is a decision made in advance by people betting on an audience. The second is the audience answering, which leaves the question the chart cannot answer on its own. Everything so far treats this as a film that turned up and underperformed. It is more interesting than that, because of what was already standing behind Cookie Queens long before a single royal name was attached to it.
A special screening of the documentary Cookie Queens. This was the doc that premiered at Sundance. Harry and Meghan are listed as executive producers. I believe Netflix just slung their names on there to fulfill the contract that Netflix was looking to just exit as quickly as possible.
Cookie Queens did not begin in Montecito. It began with 2 documentary filmmakers, Michael Dweck and Gregory Kershaw, who had the original idea and brought it to a director named Elisa Namias. The project starts there, and it starts without anyone royal in the room. Namias took it forward the way documentaries actually get made, which is slowly and with other people's help. The project moved through the Sundance Catalyst community, the part of the institution that exists to connect independent filmmakers with investors, donors, and institutional backers. It is not a ceremonial association or a logo on a poster. It is the mechanism by which a documentary without a studio behind it finds the people willing to put money and standing behind an idea that does not yet exist on screen. Support accumulated through that channel over time. It is unglamorous work. It happens years before anyone sees a trailer, and it is a large part of why the film existed at all. Then came the filming itself. A small crew followed a cookie season across the country over months, moving between locations as the season moved, working at the scale that independent documentary work usually means, which is a handful of people and a lot of driving. They came back with roughly 300 hours of footage. What reached theaters was 91 minutes.
And that is simply not good enough, of course, for a film that had this much hype and had these 2 human beings behind it. Indeed, the docu-film about Girl Scouts is being trashed by Hollywood insiders. One industry source telling the Times newspaper, not taking the good name of the world's #1 cat video festival in vain, this is by any measure a pretty pitiful return.
300 hours cut to just over an hour and a half is months of decisions about what matters and what goes, made in an edit suite by people whose names do not appear on any thumbnail and did not appear in most of the coverage either. None of that is a small operation dressed up in generous language. It is a professionally developed documentary with a director, a development network, institutional backing, and a production process that predates the involvement everyone is arguing about. Which brings us to a distinction that is easy to lose. Harry and Meghan are credited as executive producers. Executive producer is a real credit, and it can mean a great deal, but it is not the same job as making the thing. Authorship in a documentary sits with the people who developed it, shot it, and cut it, and on this film, those people are named, and their work is documented. Namias has described the partnership in those terms herself, as something that came along more recently in the life of the project, and she has spoken warmly about the support it brought. Nothing in her account describes a film waiting around for rescue. It describes a piece of work already in motion that acquired a high-profile association at a later stage.
And Meghan and Harry came onto this project after it was already completely done, in the final stages to help give it the funding that it needed. It could be that Harry and Meghan didn't deliver any actual funding to this. They're just doing the publicity to try to get it in the news and give it a little bit more coverage because of their infamous names.
And I'm going to explain why and take you through the figures, but effectively, the per-screen delivery for this film is way less than $1,000, making it completely not viable for any more cinemas to take it on.
The sequence matters for everything that follows. The film was built, shot, and edited by a team that assembled itself long before the names and the title of this story were attached to it. The vehicle was not theirs to build, and the record is clear that they did not build it. A much narrower question follows, and a much more answerable one. If they did not originate Cookie Queens, what exactly did the association put on the table? Harry and Meghan appear on a long list of executive producers on this film through their production company. Not the list, one entry on it, among a group of people who attached themselves to the project at various points for various reasons, on its own, that is unremarkable. Documentaries collect executive producers the way jackets collect lint. What happened around that credit in public is the part worth examining. Meghan has said she saw footage well before the premiere and understood immediately what the hook was, and she has described wanting the partnership to support and uplift the project. That is her account of what she wanted the association to do. It is also, as it happens, a fair description of what the association then did. Because it was delivered, visibly and at scale. They went to Sundance. Meghan introduced the screening herself, in front of a festival audience, in a room where an introduction is not a private courtesy, but a public event that gets recorded, photographed, and written up before the film is finished playing. The interviews followed. The coverage followed the interviews. And attached to all of it, in every headline and every chyron and every trade write-up, were the titles, not the production company name, not the executive producer credit in the small print. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, front-loaded, doing the work that phrase is kept around to do.
Meghan tells the little girls that she used to sandwich Girl Scout cookies together and then eat them with jam.
But I like shortbread, so I really like the truffle oils too. I like to dip them in jam.
The lady that sells jam likes to dip them in jam, and the girl, I'm pretty sure one of the three, I've never heard of someone do that. Exactly. No one's ever heard of someone do that because that is stupid. Oh, well, I also sell jam. Don't forget to go to asever.com. Did you at least promo it correctly, Meghan? If you're going to say this stupid shit, at least promo it.
The machinery ran exactly as designed, and there is no mystery about why it gets used. The styling is the load-bearing part. Every deal and every launch leads with it, because without it the sentence is a couple in California with a production company, and with it the sentence is royalty at a film festival. The proposition narrows to something answerable. Nobody is testing their filmmaking here, because there was none. What was supplied was attention, prestige, access, and a title-led public profile pointed at an existing product that already had its own filmmakers, its own backing, and its own festival position. That is the contribution, whole and entire. It is real, and most independent documentaries never get offered it. But it does mean the opening weekend measures something specific rather than something general. Not the craft, which belonged to other people. Not the material, which was not theirs to shape. The one thing they did supply, publicly and deliberately, across a festival appearance and a promotional cycle built around 2 words and a title. That attention did not arrive at an empty room. The film it attached itself to had already collected rather a lot on its own. Sundance programmed Cookie Queens as a family matinee at the Eccles Theater, which is the festival's largest venue, and the public festival record described the project as carrying real star power.
It sounds like it's a curated reel, 70 minutes long, and this is what I love. It's listed that the proceeds will go to animal charities. No celebrities, no powerful, meaningful messaging, and still made more than double the money of Cookie by a wide margin, landing in the top 10 while their project didn't crack. Again, $300-something thousand.
So if Meghan really truly wanted to soften her image and support children, affiliating with an organization that is genuinely free or puts families first financially would have been a far more authentic move than backing a glossy documentary about a corporate cookie machine that takes advantage of families and girls who just want to participate in the Girl Scouts organization. And when you contrast it with, for example, the real royals who support organizations that help communities and families and doesn't charge them up the wazoo just to show up and be there, just to be part of it, take massive profits to the top, to the corporate teams.
The institution put a documentary about a cookie season in front of a family audience in its biggest room, deliberately, with the volume turned up. The response, according to the account that reported the acquisition, was warm, with multiple standing ovations. Nobody in a festival theater is obliged to stand, and this audience stood more than once. Then the industry moved. Roadside attractions acquired United States rights following a competitive negotiation, and the word competitive is doing real work in that sentence. It means other buyers were in the room. A documentary about the cookie season does not attract a bidding situation by default, and most independent documentaries never see one at all. This one did, and Roadside came out of it holding the rights. What followed was a commitment rather than a quiet release. Roadside announced an exclusive summer theatrical run, aimed at a broad audience. Exclusive theatrical means the film goes to cinemas and only cinemas for a defined window, with no streaming safety net running alongside it. It is a distributor putting a documentary into the summer market and asking audiences to travel for it. The festival circuit then delivered its own verdict. Cookie Queens won the Audience Award for Festival Favorite at the 2026 South by Southwest Film and Television Festival. Not a jury prize decided by a small panel with a taste for difficult cinema. An audience award, voted for by the people who actually sat through it, at one of the largest festivals in the country, months after Park City, and in front of an entirely different crowd. 2 separate festivals, 2 separate audiences, and a competitive commercial negotiation all landed in the same place, which removes the easiest explanation for what happened in August.
It's all just too perfect, the way that everything continues to happen, and this woman just continues to suck, and she doesn't know what she's doing, and she says something stupid.
Almost no ticket sales so far. Meghan has been trying to promote it by doing a few publicity stunts.
The comfortable version of this story is that Cookie Queens was a weak film nobody wanted, quietly dumped into theaters by people who knew exactly what they had. That version is not available. The festivals that showed it gave it prime placement and prizes. The audiences inside those festivals stood up and voted for it, and a distributor spent money in a contested negotiation to own it. Nor was it orphaned at the point of release. The film reached 446 theaters through an established distributor on an exclusive theatrical plan, which is about as far from an abandoned release as an independent documentary is likely to get. The film did not lack endorsements. It collected them at a rate most independent documentaries never approach, from festivals, from the audiences inside those festivals, and from a distributor competing to acquire it. What it lacked was conversion after all of that, which is a different failure entirely, and a considerably stranger one. Applause is free. Voting in an audience poll is free. The gap between a room in Park City rising to its feet and $794 a location in August is the gap between enthusiasm and transaction, and this film crossed the first without ever arriving at the second. Which points at the next question. Festival enthusiasm is one audience, self-selected and already inside the building. Was there a larger one outside it? There was, at least on paper, and the filmmakers were not vague about who it was. The film was positioned for children, parents, and grandparents, not a niche, the family bracket, and it is a bracket that still buys physical tickets when everything else has migrated to a sofa. The director went further and named the natural affinity audience directly. More than 50 million Girl Scout alumni in the United States. People with a personal connection to the subject, most of whom did not need the premise explained to them, many of whom sold the cookies themselves at some point and remember doing it.
Meghan aggressively uses her title. She has a staff member announce her name and her title when she enters a room, for goodness sakes. The most bizarre thing you could possibly imagine.
A poll just came out. Meghan's at the bottom. Nobody likes her over there in Britain. And that's a British poll.
And behind that, a cookie tradition that operates as an annual business of roughly $800 million. Read those two figures together, and the theoretical case is close to ideal. A recognizable subject with mass nostalgia attached, an audience measured in tens of millions rather than thousands, a commercial tradition large enough that its product is a fixture of American life. A family-friendly, accessible film about that exact thing, released in summer, when families are actively looking for somewhere to take children. The audience was not hypothetical in the sense of being invented. It exists, it is enormous, and it is identifiable. And the reviews did not stand in the way. The available critical snapshot was strongly positive. There goes the other alibi, because the second comfortable explanation for a weak opening is that the notices were poor and word traveled. They were not, and it did not. Reviews cannot account for every individual viewer who stayed home, but a hostile press is simply not what this film walked into. Assemble the position as it stood on the Friday. A film with festival awards behind it. A distributor committed to an exclusive theatrical run. Strong reviews. 446 theaters. A subject connected to an $800 million tradition. Royal titles attached to the promotion and a Sundance introduction already banked. Against all of that, $354,000. Which is where the paper audience stops being an asset and becomes the sharpest part of the problem. A film with no obvious constituency that opens quietly, has an explanation ready-made. Nobody knew who it was for. This film knew exactly who it was for, said so publicly, and reached almost none of them. 50 million alumna and $794 a room is not a marketing puzzle. It is a conversion result. Because an audience on paper is a description of people who could plausibly be interested, it is not a queue. Interest and attendance are separated by a series of small decisions, and every one of them has to go the film's way. Somebody has to know it exists, decide it is worth an evening, find a showtime, and pay for it. The theoretical audience clears the first hurdle. The opening weekend measures how many cleared the last. On this weekend, the answer was very few.
And, you know, I like to dip the Girl Scout cookies in jam, specifically the as ever. Like, be real about it, Megan. This is ridiculous. But then again, we got the daytime Emmy thing coming up, and no one thinks she's gonna win it. And I mean that a lot. If you really look at the actual thing, her show versus all these other shows, we talked about it on this show. Well, if you look at it, it's really sad, man.
The affinity was real, the reviews were strong, the reach was wide, and almost nobody moved. All of which makes the film that beat it worth a closer look. Because whatever CatVideoFest was doing, it was not resting on a theoretical audience. CatVideoFest was not a folder of clips somebody uploaded and a cinema shrugged and played. It was an annual, curated, G-rated theatrical event, and by 2025 it was in its 8th year. 8 years is the part that matters. The thing had a history, a reputation, and a date on the calendar that people had learned to expect. According to the Associated Press account, it had reached more than 500 independent theaters across the United States and Canada, expanded internationally, and taken more than $1 million at the box office in the previous year. Not a novelty that happened to be available. An established touring product with a footprint most independent documentaries would take without asking a single question about it. The curator described exhibitors who bring it back year after year, and audiences that run from children through grandparents and every age in between. Repeat exhibitors are the detail worth holding on to. A cinema does not rebook an event 8 years running out of sentiment. It rebooks because the previous bookings sold, and it knows roughly what the room will look like before the tickets go on sale. There is also a reason to go beyond the program itself. A portion of every ticket supports local shelters and animal welfare organizations, and the reported total raised since 2019 has passed $1 million. The pitch to a customer is straightforward. Come out for an hour and a bit, watch cats, laugh in a room with other people doing the same thing, and some of what you paid goes to animals nearby that need it.
We want to invite all the cookie queens to come out and celebrate with us. You know, she could make something of it, but these people don't think. They don't. They have no talent, dude.
It barely muster $250,000 from its release in 446 cinemas. Each screening of the movie earned around $500.
And it is almost aggressively clear. You know what it is. You know what it costs you. You know when it happens, because it happens every year. You know why watching it in a cinema is different from watching it at home, because the point is the room. And you know your money does something afterward. Now set the other proposition beside it. A documentary with festival awards, strong reviews, an exclusive theatrical release, a broad family positioning, an affinity audience of 50 million, and royal titles on the promotional cycle. Every one of those is impressive. Not one of them is a reason to be in a specific seat on a specific Friday. There is the mechanism. It is about which product answered the only question a ticket buyer actually asks, which is why this, why here, why tonight. CatVideoFest answered it in a sentence. Cookie Queens answered it with a press cycle, and press cycles do not have showtimes. The prestige language around the documentary was genuinely more impressive. Awards, ovations, a competitive acquisition, a duchess making an introduction at Sundance. All real, all documented, all worth something. The cats had none of it, and did not need any of it, because they had 8 years of people knowing exactly what they were buying. Which returns us to the chart, where the cats are only the first problem. There are 2 more rows in that cluster, and both of them make the position worse. One place above Cookie Queens on the same chart, the cat comparison stops being the interesting one. Hadestown finished 11th with $432,596 from 481 theaters, an average of $899 a location. 481 theaters, 446 theaters. Effectively the same release footprint, 35 rooms apart out of nearly 500, and the ranks did not come out the same. This is the comparison with the fewest escape routes in it, because the usual explanation for a weak average is that a film was pushed too wide too fast. Hadestown was pushed just as wide, It converted better per room and finished a rank higher. The gap between $899 and $794 is not enormous in isolation. What it removes is the excuse.
Numbers. It opened on the 7th in 446 theaters, almost $328,000 worldwide, according to Box Office Mojo. That's pretty.
So I know Sussex Squad was trying to do math again, and they don't understand it. They were just trying to say, well, Cookie Queens didn't come out in a lot of theaters, maybe 2 or 3. Wait, what?
Yeah, 446
That's a lot.
theaters. It's nothing to sneeze at. The figure is not enough to break the documentary into the weekend's top 10 releases. Among those that did make the cut, however, was Will Brandon's CatVideoFest. So get this, the Cat compilation video was only in 255 theaters, and it still managed to earn almost $569,000 globally.
On a near identical screen count in the same weekend against the same distracted August audience, another title did more per location. Screen count was not the problem. Something happening inside those rooms was. Then there is the row directly above Cookie Queens, and it is the one that does the real damage. Tony finished 12th with $360,280 from 6 theaters. 6. A platform opening, a completely different release strategy with an expansion plan behind it. A platform release opens in a handful of prestige venues in major cities, builds notices and word of mouth, and widens over the following weeks. It is engineered to produce a spectacular per-screen number, and it did. $60,046 a location. That average is not a like-for-like comparison. 6 rooms in selected cities is not 446 rooms across the country, and the 2 films were never trying to do the same thing on the same weekend. But strategy does not touch the rank. Tony finished above Cookie Queens on total gross, not on average, not on efficiency, on the plain number of dollars taken. $6,018 more, from 6 theaters against 446. A film playing in 6 rooms outgrossed a film playing in 446 rooms, and the chart printed them 1 line apart. Set the 3 of them out, and the position becomes hard to defend from any direction. Beaten on efficiency by a Cat compilation with 191 fewer screens. Beaten on rank and per location average by a release of nearly identical width. Beaten on raw gross by a 6-screen platform opening that had not even started expanding yet. 3 different weaknesses exposed by 3 different release models, and the film failed each test on its own terms, rather than through some quirk of how the chart is compiled. Wide enough to be tested properly. Too thin per room to make the width look like anything but exposure.
You know, that old documentary she slapped her name on, the one about Girl Scouts and how they manipulate and they are kind of mean to each other and how cute ones only win and all the weird, sad subtext that I've gone with you before. Well, she slapped her name on it as an executive producer, which means the producers of Cookie Queens thought, yeah, let's bring her on. She might get us some publicity. But also, she'll probably get us into Netflix. However, as I broke the news, what was it, earlier this year? It feels like 5 years ago. No Netflix passed.
The least flattering place to sit on a chart is exactly there. Not obscure, not buried, not unfairly matched against blockbusters. Fully distributed, fully reviewed, fully promoted, and outperformed in every direction by films with less behind them. The numbers are settled, and they point the same way from 3 angles. What remains is what they say about the thing that was supposed to make the difference. The association got the film written about in places that do not usually cover independent documentaries. It put a duchess on a stage at Sundance introducing a cookie season to a festival audience. It produced interviews, headlines, trade coverage, and a promotional cycle that most films in this category never get near. All of that happened. None of it appeared on the chart. There is the distinction the weekend actually measured, and it is sharper than the usual argument about whether these 2 are popular or unpopular. Attention is not demand. Prestige is not demand. Access to a press cycle is not demand. Demand is a person deciding, on a specific evening, to spend money and hours on your thing instead of the several hundred alternatives available without leaving the house. Different currencies, and they do not convert at par. The royal styling was the engine of the first, and had no visible effect on the second, which is where the title-led branding shows both what it does and what it cannot do. Every venture leads with the same phrasing, because the phrasing is what opens the door. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex gets a documentary into outlets that do not usually cover them. It gets a screening introduced by someone photographers want to photograph. It converts a modest independent film into a story with a headline in it. But a headline is not a ticket. The audience that reads about a duchess at a film festival is not obliged to buy anything, and on this weekend, overwhelmingly, it did not. 446 theaters, 13th on the chart, behind Cats, behind a similar-sized release, behind 6 screens. The wider argument about all this usually runs on whether the titles should still be in use. Set that aside and something more practical emerges. The titles are the product. They are the thing being sold into every deal and every launch, and they are being sold on an implied promise that royal attention is commercially convertible. This weekend put that promise in front of the measurement that decides it, which is what strangers paid. The attention arrived exactly as advertised. The audience did not follow it. What the association added on top of the filmmaker's work was attention, prestige, and access rather than customers. One weekend is one commercial data point, shaped by release timing, competition, category, and the ordinary difficulty of selling documentaries in August. But this was the weekend with the runway behind it. The festival record, the reviews, the distribution, and a title-led promotional cycle no comparable documentary could have bought. Royal styling can open the press door. It cannot order the audience through it. The whole thing on one line reads like this: a documentary developed by independent filmmakers, institutional backing accumulated over years, a prime slot at Sundance and standing ovations inside the room, an audience award at South by Southwest, voted for by the people who watched it, strong reviews, a distributor that won it in a competitive negotiation and committed to an exclusive theatrical run, an affinity audience of more than 50 million people attached to a subject worth $800 million a year, and royal titles on the promotional cycle, doing exactly what royal titles are kept around to do. All of that into 446 theaters for $794 a room. A compilation of cat videos needed 191 fewer theaters to reach the top 10, and took roughly 2.81 times as much out of every location it played. A musical adaptation on a near-identical screen count finished above it. A film in 6 theaters, 6, still expanding, outgrossed it outright and printed 1 rank higher on the same chart. Cookie Queens finished 13th. Something more specific than a disappointing number. It is the gap between how loudly a thing was announced and how quietly it was attended. Which raises the question this keeps arriving at. If royal title attention can generate a press cycle, a festival stage, and coverage across outlets that would not otherwise care, but cannot generate enough people and enough seats to clear $800 a room, then what happens to every other venture built on the same foundation? Because this is one venture and one weekend. Whether it is the shape of something wider is what the next one takes on directly. The real reason Meghan Markle drops her business ventures so quickly. Same question, wider evidence, and a pattern that becomes considerably harder to explain away once you line the ventures up in order.